What are the most exciting games releasing in 2019? Well, that list is probably going to be very different for all of us, but I wanted to do a list based on the games that I'm most interested in this year. This goes without saying that there could easily be games that I may have missed, or perhaps I'm just not that excited for them. And that's fine, this isn't a one-shoe-fits-all list, just the games I'm personally excited for. Maybe there's some on this list that you are too, or you haven't heard of. First up, a game that you may have forgotten about, and I really hope that we get to play it this year. One of the biggest pop culture franchises around right now is the Avengers. Marvel and Disney are nailing all of their films, and with the next Avengers film releasing pretty soon, the excitement is very high. And did you know that as of right now, Crystal Dynamics, the developers of Tomb Raider, are currently working on an action Avengers title that is apparently part of a new multi-year multi-game licensing deal. We don't really know all that much other than what we got to see in the small trailer, and that the game is being designed for gamers worldwide and will be packed full of characters, environments and iconic moments. It also claims to introduce a universe that gamers can play in for years to come. It sounds quite a lot like an action RPG maybe, but honestly right now not all that much is known about it. Another one that I hope we get our hands on this year, but we don't know much about, is Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, which is an upcoming game from Respawn Entertainment, the same studio that brought us Titanfall, and of course some of the original and best Call of Duty games. It takes place between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope, and it centers around a surviving Padawan as the Jedi are being hunted down. Other than that, details on the game are pretty scarce. What we do know is that it's going to be a single player action adventure experience, and if the Titanfall 2 single player campaign is anything to go by, we can be really excited with what Respawn can achieve with a mature story driven Star Wars experience. Please sign me up. Next, Doom Eternal. I can't tell you how much I loved the first Doom game. Of course, when I say the first Doom game, I mean the first game that released in 2016, although the original is a classic of course. Before the 2016 version released, I'm not sure what we all expected, but I couldn't have been happier with the route they took. They really just stripped everything back and gave us a game that was incredibly satisfying. Cool weapons, tons of demons, amazing music that got you pumped, and you just found yourself getting engrossed in the game that it was mesmerizing at times. The sequel promises more of the same, but with new weapons, demons and mechanics. Colour me interested, Doom Eternal is going to be awesome. Now, this game, it had to be on my list, and undoubtedly on hundreds and thousands of other people's lists too. The Last of Us Part 2. Unfortunately, we don't have a solid release date for it yet, but there are strong rumours that it will release this year. The Last of Us Part 2 was one game that was briefly shown in a 2019 game preview video from Sony. Even still, it doesn't say it's going to be releasing this year, but we can hope. The first Last of Us game is one of my favourites of all time, and it's one of the best story games, mixed with incredible visuals, fantastic gameplay and atmosphere. The story and the characters were just really well done, and they played on your emotions. The new game, of course, is on another level of visual quality by the looks of it. We've seen gameplay of it, and the way that the game flows into different animations and moves is incredible, very natural. Naughty Dog just have an extra level of detail and polish of games that not many other studios can compete with. And there's no doubt The Last of Us Part 2 will shift Sony consoles like hotcakes. Easily one of my most anticipated games of 2019. Okay, a big one, Cyberpunk 2077. I'd say that there is a chance that this could be released late 2019, maybe October, but I accept it's a slim chance. While that's even a possibility, I'm going to cling on to it. Cyberpunk 2077 is a futuristic open world game by the creators of The Witcher. They make exceptional games, no question about it. And when I first saw footage of Cyberpunk behind closed doors, I was blown away with the detail, the world and how alive it felt, the visuals, the art style. It looked incredible and next gen, ahead of its time in many ways. And if they can pull off their vision in the whole game, it's going to be one of the best games of not only 2019, but perhaps all time. They were also keen to point out that it's a first-person RPG rather than a first-person shooter. So it might take place from a first-person perspective, unlike the Witcher series, which was third-person, but it's still first and foremost an RPG, just from a first-person perspective. The game can't come soon enough as far as I'm concerned, but I'm also happy waiting for them to get it as perfect as it can be. A game that's coming up soon Anthem. Let's assume you've heard of Mass Effect. Mass Effect 2, one of the best games of all time in my opinion, absolutely loved it. Well, the team at BioWare, who have previously worked on the original Mass Effect trilogy, have been making a new game called Anthem. It's very different from what they've previously done with Mass Effect, and instead it's similar to games like Destiny, so co-op based shooters with a live service at their core. And Anthem is an open world game that takes place on an unfinished world where humanity is struggling to survive in a savage environment full of interesting and dangerous creatures. The key for this game though is that there is no PvP as of yet. It's an entirely co-op experience, at least that's how it's been designed. You could play it on your own if you really want to, but it's definitely going to be better with friends. I'm really excited to see how Anthem shapes up. It's coming out soon. I played a demo of it at E3 last year and I thought it was really interesting. Let's see. Okay, In the Valley of the Gods. This isn't really a game that I'd always be drawn to, but when I saw the trailer for it, I thought it looked really interesting. And then I found out that Valve, yeah, that Valve, Steam, Half-Life, Counter-Strike, actually bought the studio called Campo Santo who are developing this game, and that must say something. Now, I enjoyed the art style and it's made by the same people that brought us Firewatch. It's set in remote Egypt in the 1920s and it centres around the life of Rashida, a disgraced former explorer and filmmaker. It just looks different and interesting, and I think that's why it caught my attention. The animations in particular are very nice. Could be a bit special, this one. And how about this one? Control. Control is a brand new game by Remedy Entertainment, who you previously know from games like Alan Wake and Quantum Break, and of course, let's go back to the OG, Max Payne. Much like with those games, Control is played from a third-person perspective, and you've got a pistol called the Director's Pistol that can be transformed into different shapes. I hope you're staying with me. It's basically a single-player game where the main character can bend and twist items to her will to take out enemies. It looks wacky and different, that's why it's got my attention. Gorgeous looking game, could be a very fun action title. Next up, The Division 2. I actually played quite a bit of the first Division game when it came out, but one thing that impressed me more than anything was the environments of the game. The level of detail in New York City was incredible. The city genuinely didn't feel like your basic video game map. It felt like an alive city. The Snowdrop engine they used to power the game is a really impressive piece of kit. When the original game launched though, I think there were quite a few problems that players found. Certain parts of the gear system were overly complicated, and the Dark Zone didn't always end up being as fun as it sounded on paper. That being said, the devs worked really hard on the game over the following months and improved it leaps and bounds. They added new game modes, tweaked tons of stuff in the game, and as of today, the game is in a much different state to how it launched, and for the better. And that's why I think The Division 2 has a ton of potential. If they can launch The Division 2 from where the first game left off, with all of those improvements and community feedback taken on board, they could be onto a winner here. Of course, this game is set in Washington now rather than New York as the original, so it's a completely different environment to explore and tons of new landmarks to see. Another FPS here, Metro Exodus. For those of you who aren't familiar with the Metro series, it's a series of first-person shooter games developed by 4A Games, and it's based on the novels by writer Dmitry Glukhovsky. The new game, Exodus, follows on from the events of Metro 2033 and Metro Last Light, both excellent titles. It's set in a post-apocalyptic wasteland in Russia, and you're going to be fighting against other humans, but also mutated creatures too. And in this game you play as Artyom, one of a group of survivors who are travelling east away from Moscow to try and find more hospitable conditions to live in. You take the journey by train, and as you can imagine, it's not going to be plain sailing or railing. Hey, you get the point. The game looks stunning. Visually, it's impressive and the environments look fantastic, as do the mutant monsters that attack you. As with previous games, you're going to have a mixture of stealth and action, and day and night cycles will change the way that you approach different situations, whilst at the same time struggling to manage your inventory with limited ammo. I'm looking forward to this one. How about a couple of exclusives? Well, let's talk Xbox and Windows for a second, more specifically Halo and Gears. Gears of War 5, we know already that Gears 5 will launch this year, and we already had a trailer in summer of last year. What you first may have noticed was how good the game looked. Gears has always been impressive visually, but the lighting in that trailer and the animations were just very impressive. My worry with Gears though is that they don't always innovate enough with the gameplay after Gears 3. I've played through all of the Gears games, but sometimes the gameplay did become a bit of a grind and tedious. It never really changed up that much, so I hope that this time around they offer up something more interesting with different mechanics and environments. And in this Gears you play as Kate Diaz, an outsider born outside of the walls. Could be something cool. Multiplayer of course, always good for Gears games. Halo on the other hand, well, I think that speaks for itself. I don't think Halo ever needs much hyping up. It's already there. Perhaps 4 and 5 weren't as well received as most of the other titles were, but Infinite is the next chapter of the franchise and the devs have promised to take Halo into new and unexpected directions. We don't really have all that much information apart from the teaser trailer that appears to show Master Chief looking quite marvellous. Beautiful suit. The problem here is that this may be a few years out, so I'm being optimistic, hoping it's going to release this year, but that trailer felt more like a tech demo than anything to me, so perhaps this will be a launch title for a new Microsoft Xbox that's probably a couple of years away. As we're wrapping things up, a few extras thrown in here. What about the new Far Cry game, New Dawn? I really enjoyed Far Cry 5. I thought it was a good game. The world that they created was beautiful, the gameplay was fun, there's always stuff to do, random encounters. The only problem I had was constantly being kidnapped. That got old pretty fast. And with Far Cry New Dawn, the story seems to be picking up from where Far Cry 5 left off, but my only concern is how different is this going to be with it being so soon after that game released. We'll have to see if it can stand on its own 2 feet as its own experience, or is it just going to feel like a half measure? Next, Death Stranding, also a game that's very interesting to me just because it looks bonkers. It's been rumoured to release this year, but again, you can't really take much from that until it's officially revealed. The game has this interesting connection between life and death. It's got babies strapped to chests and Norman Reedus, Hideo Kojima. Need we say more? The gameplay they released though does really intrigue me. And how about Rage 2? Well, it's not something that I'm really hyped for, but from what we've seen, and I even played a bit at E3 earlier this year, the gameplay looks solid and pretty fun. The first one was an okay game for the most part, and the next one looks like it's attempting to make something just as in your face and Mad Max, and I'm not against that at all. It's an open world style shooter and I think that's going to appeal to a lot of people. The first game was pretty revolutionary because of the engine that powered it rather than the game itself, and I'm not fully sure that this game can offer up enough clout compared with games like Far Cry or Doom, but we will see. Days Gone, a Sony PlayStation exclusive that we first saw back in 2016 I think it was, and it's due for release in the early part of 2019, and it stars Deacon St. John, who's a bounty hunter struggling to survive in a post-apocalyptic Oregon. It's an open world survival game, so you will be using your trusty motorbike to get around to survive while fighting off plenty of enemy threats, zombies and humans alike. It looks great, and hopefully when it finally releases, it should live up to the hype. I feel like the zombies trend in popular entertainment and culture is dying off now though, but could be pretty good fun. Now finally, one thing that I haven't mentioned is any sort of new game from DICE. And that reason is that we just don't know if they're going to release one this year. In recent times, there has tended to be either a Battlefield or a Battlefront title that releases towards the end of the year. But as of now, we haven't heard anything relating to anything new. Battlefront 2 released at the back end of 2017, and of course BF5 just released, so surely we can't be seeing another Battlefield title that soon. However, we could see some kind of new Star Wars game from DICE this year, or perhaps a new IP. I feel like the devs might be wanting to experiment a bit more now rather than doing the tried and tested Battlefield Battlefront formula. Keep your eyes open and your fingers on the pulse. And there we have it, a list of all sorts of games that I'm excited for coming this year, touch wood. Some I'm sure plenty of you may not be that hyped by, and there are probably some that I've missed off that you're really interested in, and that's fine. These are just the games that have really got my attention. Of course, there are some that might not release this year, like I said, but we can always hope. You mustn't dare to dream a little bigger, darling. Stole that one from Tom Hardy in Inception. With that said, I hope you enjoyed this, guys. Let me know what your most anticipated games this year are. Leave a like if you liked the video, a dislike if you didn't, subscribe for more, and I'll see you in the next one.